Joining me now from the site of the Harris-Walz rally in Detroit is Michigan Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee. Congressman Kildee, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kristen.
I want to get your reaction to this extraordinary moment. You were among those who stood by President Biden when some in your party were calling for him to drop out. Now that you see the reception, now that the new ticket is set, what's your take? What's your reaction?
Well, I'm really enthusiastic. I'm all in. I think the president made the right decision. It was my view that he should be given the space to make that choice. He did. I think it was the right decision for him and the country. This is evidence of what that decision has unleashed. The level of enthusiasm, the number of new volunteers, the incredible outpouring of support, financial support, and people coming to events like this is the kind of energy that it's going to take to win what will be a very close race. Michigan could be a key. Here they are on their first full day as a ticket, and here they are right here in my home state of Michigan. I'm excited. I'm enthusiastic, as you can tell. So are a lot of other people.
I can tell, and we can hear the crowds behind you. I want to play something that your colleague, Tom Emmer, had to say about Tim Walz. Take a listen.
This guy who tries to come across as the affable Midwesterner is a left-wing radical who, under his failed leadership in just 6 short years in my state of Minnesota, we've seen taxes skyrocket. Tim Walz is a great pick for the Republicans. It is just going to enhance the radical left shift. And the choice is going to be really simple this fall.
That is basically, Congressman, the message that we are hearing from Donald Trump and Republicans across the spectrum. How do you respond to that? And are you concerned about the policies that Tim Walz has enacted in the state of Minnesota that they open him up to those attacks?
Well, look, I expect that from Tom Emmer or any other of the Republican operatives. They're going to try to describe anybody who's a Democrat or a Republican that they don't like in the most negative terms. Tim Walz is a moderate guy who has deployed policies in Minnesota to support families. If they think that that's too far left to support families that need help or to make sure that, kids have a meal at lunchtime, we can have that conversation, and we will on the campaign trail. It points to exactly how far out of step with middle America the Republican Party has become. I served with Tim in the Congress. He and I are good friends. We just spoke last week. He was known to be a guy who was a pragmatic and practical policymaker. They don't like that. I understand. They're going to try to spin this any way they can. But Tim was a high school teacher. He's a veteran. He's a coach. He's a dad. He's just one of these guys that I think will play really well here in Michigan. Republicans don't like that, so they're going to try to create a new narrative around him. My view is let them have their say. Let them say what they want to say. Tim's authentic. Kamala's authentic. That message will break through.
Well, one of his big challenges, quite frankly, is that a majority of voters just aren't familiar with him. In fact, according to the latest NPR Marist poll, 70% of respondents said they don't know who Tim Walz is, and fewer than other folks who almost made the ticket, quite frankly. How does he introduce himself to the American public? And I know he was just picked yesterday, but does he need to flood the airwaves, do interviews? Obviously, we're expecting him to do a debate at some point. How does he introduce himself?
Yeah, I think he needs to be out there in front of the American people, and we're doing that. He's starting right off, starting in Philadelphia, obviously in Wisconsin today, here in Michigan. I'm sure there'll be opportunities for him to sit down and do one-on-ones. But this is what the campaign is for us to make sure people know who we are and to make sure they understand who Tim Walz is. But here's the thing. They may not know everything about Tim Walz, but they know Tim Walz because Tim Walz is just like the neighbor down the street. He's a guy who thinks about his family, thinks about his community, and does what he can to make it better for his family and his community. So while they might not know him yet, they actually do know him because Tim is and he's a friend of mine, so I say this with a certain amount of bias. He's a guy, once you first meet him, you feel like you've known him your whole life. And I think they're going to love him when they do that, when they meet him.
Congressman, I have to ask you about what has really dominated the headlines today, these attacks that we are hearing from J.D. Vance today, questioning Governor Walz's military service, saying that he retired just as his unit was about to deploy to Iraq to avoid the war. How concerned are you about that line of attack, and how do you respond? I mean, the reality is the campaign says, yes, he left after 24 years to run for Congress, but the reality and the timeline has not been questioned.
Look, if the Republicans, if Donald Trump, for example, wants to lead a debate over military service to this country and compare himself and J.D. Vance, who, while he did serve, we can examine his service. If they want to look at 2 decades of Tim Walz's service to this country in the uniform of this country and then serving in Congress versus Donald Trump, who used every trick in the book he could to get out of serving his country, we're happy, believe me, happy to have that conversation.
Congressman, are you concerned, though, that this could become a swift vote campaign against Tim Walz?
I think the American people are looking past that kind of attack. We're kind of used to it from the Republicans. Look at Tim Walz is a wonderful, honorable guy who has served his country as a teacher, as a member of the U.S. military, as a member of Congress, now as the governor of Minnesota. His record stands on its own merit. They're going to attack him on everything they can. They know that his biography is a strength, and that's why they're attacking him. You can always tell when the Republicans have fear because they begin to attack. And you know what? Let them do what they want to do. We're going to tell this story. We're going to make sure we tell a very clear story about the contrast, not just between the two visions of America, but between the people on our ticket versus theirs. And again, as I said, if they want to have a debate about the extent to which the candidates for president and vice president have served this country and been willing to do so over the long period of their lives, we are very happy to have that conversation, and I think we'll do quite well.
All right. Congressman Dan Kildee, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.